Should managers have autonomy on sporting directors and recruitment? Tim Sherwood has been speaking on the No Tippy Tappy Football podcast, and he was speaking about his breakdown in relations at Aston Villa with Randy Lerner over that very aspect in the game, recruitment.
I was happy with him when I went in there. And there wasn't a director of football. And me and Randy Lerner, who was the owner at the time, we travelled around Europe interviewing a few sporting directors, and he knew my feelings. I felt like it wasn't necessary. The people we were interviewing were, in my opinion, not up to the job, didn't know English football. You need someone who knows the English game. And I knew it as well as anyone. And I wanted to be the one who was instrumental in getting the new players in. So he scrapped it for a while. I was just informed that they'd hired a sporting director. Tom Fox, who was the chief exec, he was at Arsenal for a period of time before he came to Aston Villa. He knew someone, a German guy who was a very academic guy, great, probably does fantastic presentations of justifications and reasons behind every decision he makes, but does he know the game? No, he didn't know anything about the game. He didn't know what a player looked like if he hit him in the face. So it was really disappointing that he was in charge of the recruitment and they paid the ultimate price. And it's just unfortunate for a giant club like that with fantastic fan base that they had to take a step backwards.
It's interesting, Martin, isn't it? The recruitment aspect of it get taken out of his hands there, as he's describing there. I mean, you had experience of Lerner, and I know you'll have your own views and your own thoughts about him, but do you recognise anything of what Tim Sherwood was saying there?
No, I mean, when Mr. Lerner bought the football club way back in 2006, it was a different dynamic then. He didn't. He was just coming into the British game. He was an owner. He had taken over from Doug Ellis, and wanted me to run the football club in the manner in which I'd done at Celtic. And that was like manna from heaven to me, because that's exactly what I wanted to do. I wanted to be involved in everything. Players coming into the football club had to be my responsibility, and that was fine. As time moves on, and then Randy started to get more involved in the football club, I understand owners wanting to have a say. Now, Randy spent a lot of time in America. When he came back, came over to England, he was really involved. He loved the football club and made some. He improved the training facilities, terrific. He improved the Holt end as well too at the football club. So getting to the point, but he still allowed me to run it. It was just in the latter stages, and to be perfectly honest, I dealt with it pretty badly when I think about it. I should have. All the little trucks that we had, I think we should have just pushed them to the side and got on with things. Obviously, it was to do with transfer business and things like this here, but it wasn't specifically. It wasn't specifically to do with a director of football or a sporting director.
What did you handle badly?
I handled badly in the sense that we should have had more proper communication, and we should have been able to see the bigger picture. Or I should have been able to see the bigger picture. I wanted to try and push for a Champions League football at the time, and I felt as if that, and it's the owner's prerogative. I thought, well, listen here, we might just have to pull back a little bit if that was the case. But I felt that Villa were strong, and we were going in the right direction. It was just I hate to use these words, maybe, and as everybody always says, a personality clash, whatever it was. I suppose you have to have a personality to have a personality clash, but like everything else. But seriously, I didn't. Now, funnily enough, I met Mr. Lerner a couple of years later, and we got on really, really fine now. But at the time, I should have reined in. It should have been less bullshit. I should have said, wait a minute, let's accept what you're going, because you actually run the football club, or you own the football club, and it is your money.
But you were only behaving the way you behaved because you were so ambitious for the football club.
I wanted to drive on. We had finished in the top 6 for the previous 3 years. We'd gone close twice to try and get into the top 4, and I felt as if we had the opportunity to do that if we were keeping the players. However, that wasn't all to do with him, because players, like everything else, getting better money elsewhere. We lost Gareth Barry to Manchester City. Manchester City at that stage was just starting to become the big players in the game. And then the following year, we're going to lose James Milner to Manchester City. We couldn't compete. We couldn't compete with Manchester City financially to keep players that we would love to have kept at the football club. So that became a bit of a problem.
Can you identify with that, Simon? That you've got a manager there who's super ambitious for the club and can see the potential. You know, you've got parameters within which you operate.
Well, you've got to bring them with you, haven't you? I mean, I can't speak to the particular subject matter and how Martin may or may not have reacted to it, but the ideal scenario is to have a manager that's incredibly ambitious, to keep pushing, but to get him to understand where the ceiling is and to get him to buy into where the ceiling is. So that is a difficult one to balance, because you bring a guy in, you want him to push for the stars and take the moon up on the way up, but every now and again the nature of the business changes, and you've got to try and get somebody that's focused on one dimension of the football club, which is the fundamental part of it, which is the team's achievement on the pitch, has to perhaps countenance the other side. Now, ironically, you know, I spent a lot of time talking to Tim Sherwood yesterday for something else, and there's a difference between Martin O'Neill having a problem with a sporting director and a difference between Tim Sherwood. Tim Sherwood is not an established manager, wasn't an established manager, was coming into a space, and when he reflects back on those comments that he's made on that particular show, were analysed differently yesterday, he had a different viewpoint on perhaps the way he should have behaved with the football club at the time, because he was too honest in his view. He sat there telling the owner precisely what the owner didn't want to hear. You're going to get this team relegated, this team's going to go down, and that's the end of this situation, and you can bring in who you want in terms of sporting directors, and then compared it in recent times to the situation at Bournemouth. Made the same analysis. Well, Bournemouth haven't got relegated. They put somebody else in place, and what they did was they got somebody else to give them a little bit of money in January, which might have been more advisable for Tim Sherwood to do. But the balance is that I want managers that push. You want them to push. You want them to push you, but you also want to have enough of a relationship with them when you say no that they respect there's a good enough reason for it. Now, that's as much the fault of the owner as it is the person that ultimately is throwing his toys out of the pram, paraphrasing what you did at the time. Because ultimately, no one won in that situation. You had a guy in, you brought Martin O'Neill in because he was successful at Celtic. You brought him into Aston Villa, he got you what you wanted, and then you changed the rules a little bit. And if you're changing the rules a little bit, you better damn straight make sure that the guy that's helping you achieve something buys into it, or you're going to have that situation. But in some situations, it's impossible to square a circle, because you're asking a scorpion to not jump on the back of a frog and sting them when they're crossing the river.
Mark, what about now? The Villa of today?
I'm not sure whether I'm the scorpion or the frog.